We thank you so much for being here this morning. We are especially thankful for all of you who are visiting with us. We hope that we've made you feel welcome and that you are blessed by your time here. And we invite you to come be with us again and worship again with us. We are very thankful to have a special guest this morning, and that is Brother Howell Ferguson and his wife, Mary Ferguson. We're so thankful for them and for the time that we have had a relationship with them, and proudly supported the work that happens at the Chimala Mission in Tanzania, Africa. So Brother Howell taught class this morning and shared about the wonderful work that is happening there at the Chimala Mission, and I know was only able to just barely get into all of the wonderful works that they do. This morning in our worship time, he will preach a sermon, and we're so thankful for that. And I know you're probably thankful for a break and for somebody different this morning. Brother Howell and Sister Mary have been married, are married, and have 3 married children and 5 grandchildren. Howell has been preaching since 1983 and worked in world missions and preacher training in overseas schools of preaching for more than 20 years in countries including Tanzania, Nigeria, India, Ukraine, Peru, Panama, and others. Howell and Mary have lived in Tanzania for 4.5 years, in addition to making numerous trips back and forth for the past 20 years and making one recently this year. Howell is a graduate of the Memphis School of Preaching, Freed-Hardeman University, and Bear Valley Bible Institute. Howell began working as stateside coordinator for the Chimala Mission since 2019, following the retirement of Bill Stinson. They currently reside in Jackson, Tennessee. I want to point out that we have their current newsletter on the table by each exit. Would encourage you to grab one of those on the way out. I think you can sign up for their newsletters. You can follow them. We are thankful to God that we're able to support this wonderful work. We also want to encourage you to continue to pray for the wonderful work that they do. At this time, Brother Howell Ferguson, thank you.
Thank you, Brother Jake. I kind of thought for a second when I closed my eyes that I was back at Chimala again because of the heavy rains. I was expecting the power to go out any minute, but it's great to be with you this morning, and I enjoyed having the opportunity to tell a little bit about the Chimala Mission. And you're right, it's really just a touch of so much more I could say this morning. In John chapter 14, verses 1 through 6, Jesus said, "Let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. For my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also." And Thomas, and the way where I'm going you know, and the way you know. And Thomas said, "Lord, how shall we know where you're going, or the way?" Jesus said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but by me." You know, sometimes life just starts out with, the Bible says that a man that's born of woman is a few days and full of trouble. And sometimes we feel like that trouble comes pretty quickly in life. And there are days that you might get up and you wonder why in the world the day has started out that way. There may be times when it seems like everything you do just goes wrong. It's just one thing after another after another. I remember reading a story, or heard of a story actually told also, of a woman that was at an airport. She was going to catch a flight, and so she decides to go over to the little store there, and she buys a candy bar, and she comes back, she finds a spot there, an empty seat by a rather large man, and she plops down, and there's a little table beside her, and that man, and so she puts her things down, and she sets her luggage to a side, her carry-on, and then she starts to reach over for a candy bar, and she just noticed that the man next to her has just taken her candy bar, broke off a piece, and set it down and started eating it. And she thought to herself, that's very rude. That's a very audacious, just to grab my candy bar and take a bite of it, and I don't know who this man is. And so she reaches down and takes that candy bar and she bites off a piece and puts it back down and looks at that man. The man looks back at her, doesn't say a word. He reaches down, he takes part of the candy bar, he breaks it off, puts it in her mouth, sticks it back on the table. And then she just looks over at it and just gawks at him and wondering what audacity of somebody to do something like that. So she reaches down, grabs that candy bar and breaks it off again, puts it in her mouth, throws it down. And that man looks over at her, takes it, and she picks it up. He takes it and puts it in his mouth and eats the rest of it. And she says, what gall that somebody would do something like that. And she's just trying to figure out what in the world is this man doing, and just scowls at him. Well, about that time, the man gets up, he goes to the little store there at the airport, comes back with another exact candy bar, breaks off a piece and starts to eat it. And she says, well, if he's going to do me that way, I'm going to do him the same way. So she reaches over, breaks off part of his candy bar, puts it in her mouth, sits it back down, and he just looks over at her, and she just looks back at him, and neither one of them say a word. And then so she grabs a piece, puts it in her mouth, puts it down. He grabs the other piece, puts it in his mouth. And about that time, the announcement comes over the intercom that her plane's about to board. So she reaches and grabs her stuff and reaches and grabs and starts to get inside her purse to pull out her boarding pass. And guess what she found? Her candy bars inside her purse. So she had eaten half of 2 of his candy bars. Well, sometimes that's kind of how life is. You know, you just think you've got it all figured out and you find out you've done everything wrong. Well, in the story found in John chapter 14, as you go to that story, you find that it seems like that everything has just gone wrong with the apostles. It seems like their whole world is crumbling down before them. And, you know, earlier in the week, it really started out really well because Jesus comes in to the city of Jerusalem very triumphantly. The people are gathering together and they've got their palm leaves and they're waving them and they're waving these branches. They're shouting, Hosanna, blessed is the highest, he that comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the King of Israel, in John chapter 12 and verse 13. Even the Pharisees, even the chief priests who'd been trying to find some way of snaring Jesus and plotting against him, they even exclaimed, look, the whole world's going after him, in verse 19. Of course, we know that Jesus didn't come to this earth to establish a physical kingdom. He didn't come to throw off the physical yoke of Rome. He didn't come to become this great miracle-working Messiah to this fickle crowd. Well, and it wasn't very long that these priests were starting again to find some way of betraying him, looking for someone that would actually be able to be used, and we know that would end up being Judas. And so as you go into the 14th chapter of the book of John, you see Jesus and his disciples, and they're gathered around here, taking of the Passover feast in this upper room. And Jesus knows exactly what's going to happen in the next few hours. He knows that one of his own are going to betray him. He knows that there's going to be an illegal trial at nighttime. He knows that these things are all about to happen, and that there's going to be these apostles who are going to become very troubled. They're going to be scattered. He knows about the cross. He knows it's coming, and he knows about the borrowed tomb. He knows exactly how it's all going to play out. And he knows that these apostles are going to feel abandoned. They're going to feel orphaned. They're going to feel like that everything has gone wrong that Jesus had been trying to teach them in those 3.5 years. And so he begins to comfort them in this chapter. Now, I know in a group like this morning, there's bound to be some people, some of you here, who need comforted. There were those then that need it, and there are people here today who need it. Back home in North Jackson, we just found out last night that one of our members has just passed away. And we've had 4 deaths just last week at North Jackson, people that we knew very, very well. And so there are families who are grieving. There are people who are struggling. There are people who have lost jobs. There's people who've lost family members, people in the hospital, people in nursing homes, families that don't know what to do. They don't know what actions to take. They don't know how to solve things, perhaps, mental problems, emotional, anxiety, worry, all these kind of things. And we experience all kinds of troubles. But Jesus says that part of the solution when we have all of these troubles that come upon us is found in the word trust, T-R-U-S-T. We have to learn that the solution to so many of our problems is simply a matter of trust. And trust is important, and who you trust is very important. And what he tells us in this text, that when you're down and out, when you have a troubled heart, you need to do three things. You need to, first of all, he tells them, you need to learn to trust in my presence. Secondly, you need to learn to trust in the promises that I made. And then third, you need to learn to simply trust me. And those are going to be the basic components of our lesson this morning. And I want us to think about the idea of trusting in my presence. If you look at the very first verse in John 14, Jesus here says, let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In other words, what he's saying here is you trust in God, and that's fine. Now it's time for you to equally trust in me. Or you might even can put it another way. I know you trust in God, and the time will come when I'm not going to be here. You will no longer see me, but don't stop trusting me. Don't stop trusting in me. Just as you do in my presence now, my presence will be with you. Continue to trust in my presence. It's always easier to trust in something you can see. I think about this a lot of times. When I'm walking around, I'm on the ground, I'm not afraid. I've got the earth beneath me, but I look up there, and there's almost an infinity of space right above me. And if you think about that long enough, you start to say, that's kind of scary. Now, what if you were at 38,000 feet in an airplane and you're looking down? That's kind of scary. But see, we trust things that we can see, that we can touch. If you stumble, you trip, you reach your arms out. Why? You're hoping you can catch something that you know is there, the ground, a rail, another person's arm, whatever it might be. You believe in something that you can see. And we all have a little bit of Thomas in us. We want to see it. We want to touch it. We want to know it from our physical senses. Remember what Jesus says, or Thomas rather says. He says in John 20:25, unless I see the nail marks in his hand, and unless I put my finger where the nails were and put my hands in his side, I will not believe. And so Jesus shows him the nail marks, and he says, Thomas, because you have seen me, you believe. Blessed are those who have not seen me and yet believe. And what he's saying is, don't just trust me when you can physically see me. Trust me and you know that I'm in your presence, even when you can't see me. In other words, don't make conclusions about me based on when I'm physically present, because my present isn't the reason. It isn't based on what you can see or touch. In fact, that's the teaching of the Bible through and through. For example, 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 18. While we look not at the things which are seen, but the things that are not seen. For the things that are seen are temporal, but the things that are not seen are eternal. And so that's the concept. The things that you see now, they're going to perish. The world's going to be destroyed with a great and fervent heat, Peter tells us. And all of these things will be resolved. And so what manner of person should you be? Because why? Because life isn't based on what you can see and hear and touch and feel and taste. It's not based on the five senses. The car you rode into church today, well, I was going to say it was dry. It's wet now. But that's just temporary. Your house, this building, this beautiful new structure, it's all temporary. It won't last forever. We understand that. You look in the mirror. You see your body. You see your aging body. When you're young, you don't think about it. You get a little older, you start thinking about it a little more. You say, I don't look like I used to look. You want to have a laugh, get out an old church directory going way, way back, and you'll have a good laugh looking at, well, there's brother so-and-so, or there's this person, or there I was when I was just a young man, or I was just a girl. And now time has gone by, and what's happened? Well, we realize we got a dose of the truth that we change as we get older, as we grow. These things will be gone. And it's a hard lesson to learn because we face troubles, we face difficulties in life, but we need to remember the promise that Jesus had said. He said, I will be with you, I will never leave you nor forsake you, so that we may boldly say, the Lord is my helper, I will not fear what man shall do to me. Hebrews 13, verses 5 and 6. So Jesus says to his disciples, don't be troubled, trust in my presence. But then Jesus tells us also, or tells his disciples, and we can apply a lesson to ourselves, trust in my promises. Not just my presence, but what I have told you. In fact, in verses 2 and 3, he tells them, in my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. In other words, if I was not telling the truth, I always have told you the truth, then I wouldn't be telling you this. But I am telling you the truth, and you know I'm telling you what's true. I go and prepare a place for you, and if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you back to where I am, that you may be there also. That's the promise that Jesus made. He says, I'm going somewhere, but I'm not going to forsake you. In my Father's house are many mansions. You know, God gave many promises in the Old and the New Testament. He promised the children of Israel that he would give them a land flowing with milk and honey. He would give them a land that had cities, walled cities that they did not build. They would have vineyards they had not planted. They would have wells they had not dug. All this stuff would be prepared for them. It's their land. God promised to give it to them. Now, it took a little time, but they received it. They finally received it. They also was promised a Messiah. God had promised them, I'm going to send you my anointed one. I'm going to send you the one, the Messiah, who will rule and whose throne will be an everlasting throne, everlasting kingdom, and break down all the things that are obstacles before him. He's the great Messiah, and all the prophecies that came from Samuel onward all testified of Jesus. And it took a while for these things to finally be done, but Jesus was finally born of a virgin under the law in the fullness of time. He finally came. And now God is promising that Jesus is going to come back for us. Someday we'll be with him forever and ever. You know, we grow impatient at times. Scripture makes it clear, however, that you can trust the promises of God. The promises will be fulfilled. I think it's interesting, you know, the Bible doesn't say that, Jesus doesn't say only or exclusively, I'm just going to build my church and that's it. And then we're left to, okay, assembly, you know, called out, called together. But God uses many different descriptions to describe the same thing, just different terminology. For example, he uses the word kingdom. Well, kingdom conjures in our mind, a government structure, a vast amount of property, land, real estate, whatever, a country. And so you got these laws, you've got a king, you've got different things. Describe it as a kingdom. Jesus promised about, the kingdom coming. The disciples were taught to teach the kingdom would be coming. And so sometimes the church is referred to as a kingdom. Sometimes it's referred to things like paradise. In other words, indicating beauty, indicating desirability. That's something that we desire. Or sometimes it's called my Father's house, among other things. When you think about my Father's house, you think about a place that has inhabitants. Somewhere where somebody lives. In other words, this is where I live. This is my home. And so home is a place that you think of where you can take off your necktie, you kick off your shoes, put on your PJs, you can say what you want to say, you can have conversations. This is your place, this is where you live, this is where you are a resident, you're not a guest, this is your home. Well, Jesus is saying, I'm coming to take you to my Father's house. And my Father's house is a place that's going to become your home. Home is where you belong. Now, the King James says, in my Father's house are many mansions. Probably that's not the best translation. Mansions, I always thought, wow, I'm going to live in a mansion in heaven. Well, a mansion to one person might be relative to another person. Where you live and I live today, from the Tanzanian standpoint, would be considered a really, really nice mansion compared to where they live. But compared to, some people, my house might be considered a hut. So it's kind of relative. So the idea of mansion is not really the word that fits the Greek word term that's found here. Actually, a better word would be translated dwelling place or room. Now, what do we mean by that? Well, Jesus is using a word here that comes from it's an Eastern custom word, and it's the idea that when when a father has a son and the son gets married, the son brings back his bride to his father's house, and they make a room, a dwelling place for the new couple. And then when maybe another son later on gets married, and he comes and brings his bride back, then his father builds another house. And so the idea is, he says, in my Father's house are many rooms. There's plenty of room for you. There's going to be plenty of places for you to dwell, that my house, my home, is going to be your house. It's going to be your home. And that's what he's promising them. You see, the idea, in my Father's house are many rooms. I'm going there to prepare a place for you, and if I go and prepare a place for you, I'm going to come back and bring you back to my home. Well, we're the bride of Christ, right? Ephesians 5, so it's natural that he brings us back to his Father's house. We're almost there. And so Jesus would be saying, don't become discouraged. Don't become brokenhearted. The great singer Marian Anderson was once asked, what's the most memorable moment in your life? Well, she didn't say anything about singing before the President of the United States. She didn't say anything about singing before the King and Queen of England. And she didn't say anything about singing before 70,000 people in Washington, D.C. What she said was, the most memorable moment of my life was when I came home to my mother and said, Mama, you don't have to take in any more laundry. She said, that's the most memorable moment of my life. The idea of being able to come home. Home is the most memorable thing in her life. And stop and think about it for just a second. And you can do this yourself, use your own words. I'll use my own words. But a part of me is already there, if I think about it. And if you think about it, a part of you is already there in heaven. What do I mean by that? Well, your name is written there, right? Your citizenship is there. My citizenship is there. My Savior is there. My inheritance is there, and so is yours. Both of my parents are there. I've got a little brother that's there. I've got grandparents there. There's so much of me that's already there, and you can fill in the blank and put the same people in those blanks as I can. You see, soon God's promise is going to be fulfilled, and we'll all be in our Father's house. We'll get new bodies. We won't have to worry about getting old. We won't have to worry about getting sick. We won't have to worry about being discouraged, facing death. We won't have to deal with any of those things anymore that plague us. And so Jesus says, not only trust in my presence, but trust in what I promised you. I'm coming back, and I'm going to take you home. So regardless of whatever problems plague you, regardless of whatever troubles continue to try and test and tempt you, remember, I'm going to take you home. I've made promise, and I'm not going to fail. But then finally, Jesus says in verses 4 through 6, trust in me. Just trust in me. He says, and where I go, you know, and the way you know. And Thomas said, we don't know these things. We don't know where you're going, and how should we know the way? And that would be a natural response, because Jesus has been teaching them in parables. He's been teaching them in ways, but they haven't quite caught on yet, and they will eventually catch on. But he says, how do we know the way? And Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father, that is home, but by me. So what he's saying here is, I'm not just going to show you the way. I'm not just going to tell you about the way. I'm not just going to write down instructions describing the way. I'm going to come and take you by the hand to my Father's house, and then you'll be home. This morning, do you have burdens and you think you can't bear them? Do you have troubles and anxieties and worries? What am I going to do? Wringing your hand, trying to figure out what it's going to be the solution. Do you have those things in your own life? Well, Jesus says, when you're down and out and when you have these troubles, he says, trust in me because I'm going to take you home. There was a story told by Dave Galloway of a soldier who returned home from Vietnam. And his parents were socialites. They were very well-to-do, very popular, very well-known. It was Christmas season, and the parents were going to a number of different Christmas parties and celebrations during that season. Well, just then the phone rang, and it was their son on the phone. He said, "Mom," said, I'm back in the States. And she said, "Well, that's wonderful, son. Where are you? Will you be home for Christmas? We'd all love to see you. Can you come here to the parties? Everybody was just dying to see you. We're so glad you're back home. We want to see you." And he says, "Yeah, Mom, I can be home for Christmas, but I want to ask you a question." She says, "What is it?" He says, "Well, I have a friend that's with me from Vietnam. Can he come also?" And she said, "Well, sure. Yeah, he can come. Bring him along. He'll enjoy the party too." "But wait a minute, Mom." He said, "I need to explain something to you." He said he was terribly injured in Vietnam. He lost both his legs, he lost one of his arms, and his face is badly disfigured. Well, there was silence on the phone, and then her mother said, "Well, that's all right. That's all right. Bring him along. Bring him for a few days." "No, Mom, you don't understand. He has nowhere to go. He has nowhere to live. He has no one else. I want to bring him home and let our home be his home." Well, again, there was silence on the phone. And then she said, "Son, that just wouldn't do. But that's asking way, way too much of us. It's unfair. It would disrupt our lives. I'm sure there are some good government agencies that would be more to take care of him. Look, you just hurry home for Christmas now, and maybe you can visit him every once in a while." And then she hung up the phone, said goodbye. Well, when the parents returned home late that night, there was a message on their phone, an urgent message from the California police, urgent to call them. Well, they called the officer, and he said, "I'm very sorry to have to call you, but we just found a young soldier dead in a motel room. His face is disfigured. He has lost both legs and one arm. And from the documents that appear with him, he appears to be your son." You see, all we all want to do is go home. That's all he wanted to do. He just didn't know whether he'd be accepted. Well, thankfully, we can trust Jesus Christ. He says, "Trust in my presence. Trust in what I promised you, and trust in me, because I'm going to take you home." Whatever your burdens may be this morning, when you're down and out, the solution to a troubled heart is still the same. I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. I'll take you home. If you're here this morning, why won't you trust in his promises? Why don't you trust in him, just as if he were standing in this auditorium this morning, even more so, that you'd come believing that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, confess your faith, repenting of your sin, and be immersed in Christ for the forgiveness of your sins, where again, you are now part of the inheritance of Christ. You're now part of his family. You are now the brother or sister in Jesus Christ, and your inheritance waits for you, so that no matter what the world may throw at us, no matter what Satan's darts may come our way, we always can find consolation and solace in the fact that Jesus will not forget us, that we know there's always going to be a brighter day. If you need to obey the gospel, if you need to be restored, if we just need the prayers of the church that would encourage you and help you, We ask you come now while we stand and sing.